Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Remote Work Life Summit. And I've got another great guest, as ever. We only get the best guests on for you today, or on ever, because we know that it's important for you to get the best information so that you can really take action in the right direction. And today I have Elaine Pofelt with me. Elaine is a journalist and speaker. She's an independent journalist and speaker. She specializes in careers and entrepreneurship. She's a former editor for Forbes Small Business, and she's also written Fortune Small Business. She's also written for Fortune, Money, Inc., CNBC, to name a few. So she's a prolific writer in the area of careers. And I started to follow Elaine a little while back when I was just starting my journey in the world of freelancing, and I found Elaine's articles, Elaine's blogs, Elaine's journals really, really useful in terms of the inspiration, but also the actual guidance in the world of freelancing. So I knew that I had to have Elaine speak to you today because I knew that she'd be able to provide you the same inspiration and that same advice as well. Elaine has also written a book, which I ordered today, in fact, called The $1 Million One Person Business. And again, I recommend that you pick that book up because, and the reason I say that is because, again, it's a guide really, and I want Elaine to tell us more about that in as the interview progresses. But in fact, let me leave Elaine to talk about the $1 Million One Person Business a little bit more. Elaine, I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Alex. It's really awesome to be part of the Remote Work Life Summit. What a great endeavor. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you, Elaine. Really excited. I'm going to be asking, as I said, Elaine, a few questions. I'm going to be asking you a few questions today, Elaine, because as I said, I know you can give us the inspiration, that guidance that we need. But first of all, I'm intrigued because I've known you for a little while. I know you're a parent like me. I know you work remotely yourself. You're a freelancer. You've done a number of things. But I just wanted to know a bit more about the history. How did you get to where you are now? Could you give us a potted history of
Sure,
your career,
absolutely.
please?
I'll give you the highlights. So I basically started out as a street reporter. I worked at the North Jersey Herald and News, a local paper, at my first journalism job, and then the Jersey Journal in Jersey City, New Jersey. I was covering general assignment stuff, so it could be fires, police, whatever. And I became the City Hall reporter in Jersey City. At one point, I covered the Hudson County Jail. And then I got interested in business journalism after kind of burning out on all of the bad news. I needed a break from knocking at someone's door after someone had been killed or something unfortunate. And I took a job as a fashion editor at Women's Wear Daily. Could not be more different from what I had been.
Very different.
Very different. It was a little too light and fluffy for my personality type, but it was actually fun to learn about it. And it introduced me to the business world. At the time, I became friends with a designer named Jean-Paul Saramont, who's in Thailand now. He was from Thailand and he was living in New York, and he needed some help with his business plan. So I was helping him to work on it. And I found I really enjoyed the business side of things. And even more, it educated me about how important business is to doing all the other things we love. I think a lot of people get into business to do what they like, but then they stumble on the financial side of things. So I started realizing it was important. And then I had an opportunity to join Success magazine, where I became a senior editor and at one point the acting editor. That led me to Fortune, where I was the editor of Fortune Small Business Online for a while. Then I went over to the magazine. This is a sister publication to Fortune. And then in 2007, I went freelance, and that reflected some lifestyle changes. One was currently I'm a mother of 4. At the time, I had 3 children, and they were little. I had a baby, and then I had 2 twins who were 2 years older. So I think the oldest were about 4 years old at that time. And I found I loved my colleagues. I loved the work that I was doing. I loved my life outside of work, but it wasn't working for me as much anymore. I just felt like I was spending too much of my time on logistics, planning what I was going, what was going to be done when I wasn't there in whatever
Of
situation it
course,
was. I
yeah.
had enough time just enjoying my life. So I went freelance, and that was 11 years ago. I never looked back, and I gradually specialized my freelance business in writing about careers and entrepreneurship. I had been writing about entrepreneurship for quite a while, but as a freelancer, I thought, oh, I'm going to finally have a chance to write about all these other things I'm interested in, green living and parenting, etc. I quickly realized it's better to be a niche player and enjoy your interests separate from that. But people need to understand who you are and what you're selling.
Hmm.
And today, my business has evolved because journalism, as everyone knows, is a troubled industry. My heart is in journalism, but a lot of my skills are applicable to other things too. So I do some content marketing. I do some ghostwriting for CEOs, and that has allowed me basically to subsidize the journalism so I can keep on doing what I originally started doing, which has become, I don't want to say a non-paying profession, but pretty close to it,
Hmm.
just because of the state of the media today, sadly. But there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. Um, so my book reflects some of my experiences as a freelancer, but also the experiences of many entrepreneurs I interviewed for Forbes. I have a blog on the one person business, people who got to 1 million in revenue with no employees. I'll stop there, but that kind
Hmm.
of takes you to where I am today.
Sounds good to me, and it sounds like you're balancing, like you said, you're balancing your content marketing, your ghostwriting, and your journalism. But how do you? I mean, what does a typical? I mean, I'm a parent myself, so I know how much it is or how difficult it can be to juggle a variety of different things all in one go, as well as doing work. What does a typical day look like for you, Elaine?
Well, it's changed over time, Alex. When I had very small children, it was different because I was waking up in the middle of the night, taking care of babies. So my day would start a little bit later, maybe at 7 a.m. Today, my day starts at 5 o'clock in the morning most days. And usually, now that my kids are a little bit bigger, their ages 8 to 14, I can leave the house to exercise.
I hear that. Yes.
Investments, by the way, was an elliptical trainer. I got a heavy duty one that's still around after all these years, which would allow me to work out in between feeding babies and working and everything else. Now I've had the luxury of being able to run over to my local YMCA or to a yoga studio. And so I might do
Excellent.
hot yoga or cycling or go for a run. I feel like as a one person business, your health is really important. And I've realized that, with each passing year, if you get sick, it really hurts your business because there's no substitute, right? So you
Absolutely.
have to put your health front and center, and you do it to the best of your ability. When you have small children, it's much harder. As they get bigger, they become an asset in terms of helping you in your business. So they may save you time, and it's fun to work with them too. I'm kind of at that stage now.
Hmm.
Um, but you do what you can. So then I might, once they get off to school, about 8 o'clock in the morning, they're all out of the house. Now they're in 3 different schools, so you could just imagine the
Oh wow!
chaos.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, we have one in elementary, one in middle school, and one in high school. Two in high school, twins. So then I'll do some writing usually first thing in the morning. I try not to schedule phone calls so I can always get the most important writing done first. And then I know this sounds crazy, but to get out of the house, I might go do a second workout. So I might go to, like if I did cycling in the morning, I'll go to yoga at lunch, or I'll go
Hmm.
for a walk. Not always a heavy duty workout, but just to clear my head. And then a lot of times I'll do phone calls in the afternoon. It's not always a template. I mean, sometimes someone can only do a call in the morning and then I do the writing in the afternoon. Then the kids come home, they have activities. And I'm lucky that my husband works from home. So between the two of us, we're like a two-person Uber service for these kids.
Wow.
We divide and conquer with that. And we tend to eat dinner very late because of just all the sports and things and kids' commitments. And a lot of times my husband cooks. He loves to cook. So I'm very
That's
lucky. That's
good.
a
Yeah.
time consuming thing. And I really, really appreciate that. And then sometimes I'll get back on the computer a little bit at night. Sometimes we don't have time, but I've learned over time to really focus more and more on the most important things in my business and to not get too bogged down in things that I'm not good at. So maybe 2 years ago, I hired a bookkeeper. So I do have to enter information like my invoices. But she does all the balancing of the books, which she's so much better at. That saves me some time. I have a really good accountant now. People like that are really helpful, and I look forward to, with each year, trying to outsource more work. I even I employ my children to do certain things like updating links on my website. One of them built my speaker website. One of them does my Instagram. You do that as they become ready, but having that help really matters. And I do pay them because I would have to pay someone to do these things. They don't work that many hours because they're in school, but that has been valuable too. And it allows me to extend what I can do as an ultra lean business.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's a real team effort in your household. It's really good, and I think it's important, yeah. To and you mentioned something a bit earlier on. You said that you try to break away when you can and do your yoga, or you go for a walk. And that's really important as well. And Elaine, I know there's lots of people like you and I watching today. People who have got children, people who have perhaps had maybe a career break and are looking to get back into the world of work, for example. Or people who just have children and have been working all the way through. What steps or what advice can you give in terms of perhaps someone in that situation who is trying to build or launch their career from home?
The number one thing that I would recommend, Alex, is participating in things like what you're doing here with the remote work life summit or in person, because isolation is the enemy of anyone who's trying to start a business. When we look at it, no matter what society you live in, it's structured so that we get jobs, right? It's not structured to support us as solo entrepreneurs. They want us to be employees. And there's a reason for this, because the taxes are taken out of your pay first when you're an employee. When you're a business, you have to file your taxes and pay later. So governments don't really want us to be freelancers, right? So, and all the financial systems are set up around that regular paycheck. So all the people around us, many, I don't want to say all, but many of the people around us might not get why we would want to fight the system in that way. Even though we might not see ourselves as rebels, we kind of are by just wanting to do our own thing, even if it's for reasons like you and I have, which is we want to spend more time with our children. We're kind of bucking the system. So what you need for the staying power is community. Even if you're an introvert, which some people are, I think I probably am one as a writer, you still need other people. You need the reinforcement of people who are on this journey with you and see the value of controlling your own schedule and your own time, of having control over your income. People a lot of times feel like a traditional job is safer because the paycheck comes every 2 weeks. But what I find when I do book events is there are a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who get kind of forced out of corporate careers that seem safe because they've topped out in salary. So then what happens? They put all their eggs in that job basket and don't have any source of income, and they're kind of forced into entrepreneurship, which is a different thing than voluntarily choosing it. So you need people that sort of get this around you so that you don't lose faith in what you're doing, because it's very doable as long as you have the commitment that whatever challenges come up, you're going to figure out how to solve them, or you're going to find the people that can help you solve them.
No, I agree, and I think for me, it's like you said. I didn't really look at it until you've actually just mentioned that. It's in terms of the tax side of things. I hadn't really thought about that, but it's very true, and I think I had some deliberate, I suppose, ideas in my mind as to why I wanted to go freelance, and perhaps in a way, I started out being that sort of person who isolated myself in it, and it's true what you say. As I've grown into it, having that community, doing things like this, it's just really, it helps you to grow. It helps you to learn. It helps you to feel as though you're you're not the only one out there doing it as well.
Exactly.
You know.
You're so right, Alex. It's, the psychological is the hardest part of running a business, really. I mean, the things like forming an LLC, opening the business bank account, all those things are important,
Hmm.
but they're not going to get you there when it's hard. It's the mental and emotional side of things that either allows you to succeed or holds you back. And fortunately, it can be fortified, by being around other people. I know when I go to an event, this is the first year really in 14 years where I've gone to a lot of events because I always needed to be close to home. One of my children was always in half-day kindergarten or something like that, where I couldn't really leave and go into New York City, which is about an hour from where I live. But now that I'm doing it, I come back really energized. And even though you might say, okay, she wasn't sitting in her office writing or entering her invoices or whatever, it fuels me and it gives me new ideas, and it's enabled me to think bigger. And I think that's true for everyone. Even if you don't exchange a single business card and you're just listening to presentations,
Hmm.
you're still absorbing things and you're still getting that reinforcement that, you know what, you're not the only one running your business. Other people are on this journey. It's hard for them too, but there are also rewards. And I mean, that's what I hope people will take from the book is all the people in the book. I interviewed people in more than 30 businesses, had hard times,
Hmm.
but they persisted and they found solutions that maybe didn't exist before because what they're doing is new. And then they got to 1 million in revenue, which is a pretty nice, comfortable place to be. It's not their take-home pay. This is the revenue before expenses.
Hmm.
But even so, maybe in US dollars, that would be like 200 to 400,000 US dollars. You can enter it into your currency
It's not
converter.
bad. Yeah, that's,
It's not bad. If
it's
you're
not
living
bad.
in a major city, it's not going to make you super wealthy because the cost of living in London or New York or San Francisco, wherever it may be, is not low, but it'll at least allow you to live comfortably.
And I think, I mean, I think I started to read a lot more as I became somebody who worked from home and perhaps didn't network as much as I used to when I was at work. I began to see and understand the importance of reading more books. I think, and I think that's why, because I'm not really a reader as such, and that's why one of the reasons, obviously, I was so interested in your book because it not only did I like your story, but I like the stories behind those other entrepreneurs. Could you tell us a bit more about what inspired you to write the book, please, Elaine?
Sure. Well, what happened, Alex, was like a lot of writers, I get my inspiration at the last minute.
Hmm.
And I write a blog for Forbes and I write 5 a month. And it was maybe the 30th of the month. And I was looking for my last idea. And I came across these seemingly boring Census Bureau statistics showing that in the US, um, the number of non-employer businesses, that's the ones with no employees other than the owners, that were breaking 1 to 2.49 million in US dollars in revenue was increasing. And currently, since about 2011, it's increased by over 35%. The numbers are still small. There are about 36,000 of them. But knowing you and I know freelancers, right?
Hmm.
We don't know that many that are breaking 1 million in US dollars. And I'm sorry, I didn't do the currency conversion to pounds, but readers can
We
quickly
can
do
do
that.
that. We can do
Yeah.
that.
I was curious about what they were doing, and I was able to look through the census statistics and figure out what industries they were in, so retail, manufacturing, etc. And I put up a post, and people started writing to me and saying, "This is kind of a cliffhanger, Elaine. We want to know more about what they're doing. Like, what are they doing in retail? Like, are they internet retailers?" And you can't find that out from the Census Bureau beyond a certain level of detail. They won't tell you who the businesses are because of the privacy factor, right? When you fill out a census form, you don't want everyone to be able to look up what your
Of
income
course.
is,
Yes.
that type of thing. So I wrote to the readers of Forbes and I said, if you're one of these businesses, people are very curious, please write to me. So they started writing to me. There weren't that many. And I wrote a post with about 5 of them. It went completely viral. I remember I had my phone down on my dining room table and it looked like it was about to leap up off the table. I was getting so many emails in because you could write to me through Forbes, people wanting to know more. They were going bonkers, like, I need to know exactly what they did. So I started a little series as I found the entrepreneurs over several years. Every time I found one, as long as it was a non-scammy type of business, I would write about it. And gradually, this agent, I guess, was reading them. And she, after a couple of years of this, she wrote to me and said, I think this would be a great book. And I had the idea in the back of my mind, but even though I'm a journalist, I didn't really know my way around, how do you get a book agent or that type of thing. So it was a good example of how just putting your ideas out there can attract the right people to you. She wound up pitching it to Random House and a number of other publishers. Random House bought the book, and it happened pretty quickly from that point. I had to write a book proposal. It came out in January, and it's been quite a journey. It's been really fun. One thing that I've been doing is holding panels around the country with the people who actually were in the book or my subsequent coverage. So people don't have to hear my take as a third party saying this is what they did. You can actually ask the real entrepreneurs what they did, which is different. They're going to see it differently, which has been tremendously powerful. But it's also underlined something you mentioned right before we got on, which is the isolation that many people feel. They're so happy to come together. We'll get 200 or 300 people coming together, and the events start at 6:30. A lot of times we're flickering the lights on at the end at 10 o'clock because they're all there hanging out with each other. It's so refreshing for me to see when they come together, the power of that, because all those people on the stage, whether they have an e-commerce business, manufacturing, whatever it is, have been there. They've been through the cash flow shortage. They've been through maybe the doubters in their life. And just hearing that they got through it has been so powerful. For me, too, I learn something new every single time I do one of the panels.
And talking about the learning aspect, I mean, we had a conversation, I think it was over email. And I believe that you can learn from many people, within not just entrepreneurs, but people who are in the world of work. And in fact, the conversation that we had was that we were noticing a blurring of the lines between the entrepreneur and the worker. Elaine, tell us more tell me more on your views on that.
Sure. Well, I was actually a remote worker, and that is kind of what led me into having my own business. When I first had my twins, who are now 14 years old, they were very premature, and they had to be in the hospital for 3 months past their due date. And so I worked out arrangements with my job. I was working with Time Inc. at the time, where I could work from home 20 hours a week, starting 2 days after they were born. And then I would go to the hospital for the whole rest of the day and be with them. And I stretched that out for 6 months. And I'll be forever grateful that they were flexible enough to do that. At that time, now this was around, they were born in 2003, right? So a lot of the internet tools that we take for granted were not as common. So I had a VPN line, and I remember calling the tech guy about some issue that came up, and he said, you must know someone really high up in this company to have a VPN line. And I thought, well, actually, I don't. I guess my team at the magazine was pretty progressive in terms of technology. So it was hard, though, because things didn't always, the technologies didn't work as well as they do today. We didn't have, there were video conferences, but it was an expensive thing at that time. It wasn't like what you and I are doing now, which is free, Skype. So it made me familiar with how much you could do from home. And, at that time in my life, I actually needed to be in a traditional job because I had children in the neonatal intensive care. You can only imagine what the hospital bill would have been for that if I didn't have company health insurance. Now, that's different in different countries. Yes. The U.S. is behind a lot of countries on healthcare, so that might not be so much of an issue in the UK or Canada or Australia. It is in the US.
We're lucky here. We're very lucky in the UK.
You're very lucky. Yeah, that the country is so progressive about that. But you have to look at whatever realities are in your country. Mm-hmm. So I would never scoff at someone who feels like, at this time in my life, financially, I need to be in a traditional job. There's a lot of arguments against doing a traditional job, but there are a lot of arguments for that, too. There are certain things that are set up better than you can ever set them up for yourself as a solo entrepreneur, just reality. So after I had my third child, that was when I started to feel the logistical issues were getting so complicated, and I decided I'm ready to take the leap. I've been writing about entrepreneurs all these years. I kind of know how to do this, and it's really, sink or swim. And I was very committed. I mean, and this is an important point. I think you have to have the internal emotional commitment to making it happen. I wanted to be able to work from home with my children, and that drove me more than any amount of money would have or any professional rewards. That was my number one motivation as a new mother. And it doesn't matter what the motivation is. If it's the motivation you feel, that will drive you on. So when I really had to make the same amount I made in my job the first month. And it was not that easy. I said, I can do this and I will do this. Every single morning I would wake up. I had almost no business the first 3 months. We'd spend 3 hours a day on marketing and put up my LinkedIn. I'd flesh out my different profiles. I was on Media Bistro, which is used for journalists. I'd go have coffee with someone in the city who, was an assigning editor, which took some logistical planning because I had very small children. I would have to coordinate with my husband, who was extremely supportive. But eventually, I started the business in October. By the end of the year, the budget year started up again. All of a sudden, I was fully booked. I didn't realize, starting at the end of the year, the big corporations that at that time were the main source of journalism work, they used up their budgets. So now all of a sudden my business was off to the races, and it's always been fully booked ever since then. I've never had a slow time. And I think it was because I put all those things in place up front, but also because I was committed to stick with it. I could have been like, I only had 3 assignments the first few months, and I'm not making the same amount as I needed to make it in my corporate job. But then once I got to that January, I got very close to where I needed to be. And I thought we also had to buy health insurance, which cost the same as a mortgage. So it's like a double mortgage, into your life. And that meant I really had to be serious about it, or I was going to have to go back in and get a job, which wouldn't be easy to do with kids in the NICU. And, they had, at that time, they would have come out of there, but, they were fragile babies, and I didn't want to leave them with someone else. So I think it's important you have to have the timing right in your life where you're really going to stick with it. And for me, that was what it was. It was my children.
Yeah, that's been the driving factor for me as well, is my children. Obviously as well, doing something that you really like doing, love doing, is also an important part, I think. And I think you've hit that on the head. And I know that some people have, it's like you said, to actually get into the world of freelancing and entrepreneurship takes a sort of that level of commitment to doing it. Did you have any sort of, you make it sound easy in many ways, or you make it look easy, should I say? And I think you must have done a lot of work in the background, a lot of meetings, a lot of traveling, How did you actually get all those meetings in?
Well, I never traveled at all. I've almost not traveled at all for 14 years. This year I traveled a lot to different book events, but I couldn't because I had a new baby, and it just wasn't practical. And we didn't have a nanny. My husband and I were juggling the child care. We never had a nanny, which is hard with 2 full-time jobs, but somehow we were staggering it. It took a lot of commitment. I could not have done it without my husband having that attitude of my work was just as important as his, and really being willing to inconvenience himself at times. He was doing a lot of his work on the weekends because he's a real estate appraiser, and that was actually a desirable time for his clients. But they say things like go out on date nights twice a month or whatever. We weren't doing those things. We couldn't do them. Because we were kind of tag teaming it with the kids. But it really allowed us to have a really great family life all these years. We're really close to our children, and my husband is really close to them. He sees them all the time. I know some dads really suffer with this, where they're in corporate jobs where they have to travel really frequently. They're always in airport lounges. They don't get to see their kids. And he never had to do that, which has been really a blessing for us, because I do know a lot of people struggling with that right now with corporate life. So I didn't have to travel. Luckily, I'm right outside I was living in Jersey City, New Jersey, which was very close to New York City. And I had worked for a long time, which speaks to this whole thing about networking. Sometimes people feel like they don't have a network,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't go to networking events for various reasons. Maybe they're a caregiver for an elderly parent, or they have a new baby, or whatever it is. They're not in a good location for going to networking events. I had a lot of friends that I made in the years that I was working that proved to be tremendous assets. So I didn't even really have to tap new people. I just reached out to a lot of my friends in the industry and I said, I just went freelance. If you have any advice, I'd really appreciate it. And usually what would happen is they'd say, oh, guess what? I need to assign this project. I didn't know you were freelancing. And so that would bring about some work. And one of my favorite experiences was a friend, actually he was a former colleague. He introduced me to someone at my old company in a custom publishing division that I didn't even know existed. And I went in for this informational interview to see if there was a fit between me and any of the projects they were doing. And the editor said, oh, there's someone here named Wendy who would like to meet with you. And I said, okay, and I'm searching my memory banks, and I just wasn't making the connection with anyone I knew. And then this woman pops out who's very familiar, but somehow I didn't know she worked in this division. And she had, I ran a newsletter. It was very small for 8 years for Fortune Small Business Online. And she put the ad on the newsletter. Every once in a while, the ad deal would not close by Thursday, and the newsletter went out first thing. I think it went out on Thursday, and she'd asked me to hold it a little longer, maybe till Friday. And I didn't really have to ask anybody. No one seemed to even know I sent the newsletter out. So I just would do it. So she kind of remembered that, and she had a project for me. It was a huge project. It was like a $40,000 project.
Oh, wow.
Take me through months of freelancing. I had to go meet the client once a week in New York, which was very good for me at that time because I was so used to more in-person work. So it got me out of the house and was more similar to my old routine. And I was so grateful. And I thought, you know what, I really held that newsletter. It didn't take any effort for me to do that. It was just helping a colleague, a routine thing that we would all do. And she remembered it. It meant something to her. And I think people will find that just having been a friendly colleague at their old jobs.
Oh, yes.
You'd be surprised at how those folks will rally to support you if they know you're out there doing something different. And if you try to help them, many times, in my industry, there's a lot of turmoil. And if I hear about an opening for an editor, it's hard to get an editor's job today. And I know some of my clients, maybe they're not happy in their current job. I always keep them in the loop if I hear about job opportunities, if they need a LinkedIn recommendation. I try to be an asset to them because I'm so appreciative when they send me work that I feel like it's the least I can do to support them in their careers. So that's another thing people can do without even leaving their house is think about how can I help the people that are helping me?
Yeah.
What can I do to help them get to their goals? Because everyone's struggling, whether they have a job or they have a business. It's a hard economic environment because everything is changing right now.
And it sounds like, that networking aspect is just so key. I love that you've talked about that because that's just fundamental, not only to, like you said, getting your opportunities, but if you're working remotely, living remotely, then your ideas, your camaraderie, your creativity, it's all sort of intertwined with the networking. And it looks like as well, the whole idea of you paying it forward. So if somebody's helped you out, you're helping others out as well and sort of keeping those networks going. It's not just about saying hello to somebody, it's actually trying to really help them out, isn't it, as well?
It is, and I think you have to do it with a spirit of not expecting anything in return. Because when you're transactional, that's a turnoff to people. If you just are generous to people as a routine thing, it just helps you build your business in so many ways. Just helping people that are not in a position to help you, maybe younger people in your field who are just starting out, who have no networks yet, or who need help. Sometimes people write to me with pieces that they've written that they're trying to submit, and they ask me to take a look at it. I could charge them money for that.
Of
I do
course.
charge money for editing, but I know that they're young and that they're just starting out and they have no budget. And I feel like people helped me when I was a struggling young journalist. So I just read them and edit them and send them back. And who knows where that's going to lead? I may never hear from them again. But if you make it a practice to do those things, even when you're busy, I just think it's good karma, or whatever you want to
Absolutely.
call it.
Yeah.
It has a way of just bringing good into your business, and it brings good into the world too. Especially being a mother, I think about it. When people reach out to me, if my child was the one doing the reaching out, how would I want this professional to treat them? And I try to think of it through that lens. I'd want them to help my kids.
No, of
And
course.
they're just starting out.
And Elaine, I mean, we've talked about the networking, the mindset, the practical steps that you've taken yourself to build your own freelancing business, your own career. And there's a bit of fear attached to some people, or there may be some fear attached to some people who are looking to actually take that next step. They're in a situation that we're in, for example, with children. They're trying to build up that career for themselves. They're even thinking about becoming entrepreneurs themselves. What kinds of businesses, what kinds of relatable business, I suppose you could say, might somebody be able to start without sort of like deep expertise, and also something that's kind of, I don't know, doesn't have too many moving parts to it, if you see what I mean?
Well, it really depends on the person, right? Because you have to do something, even if it's not your deepest interest, that you have enough interest to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest thing to do would be some sort of consultancy or freelancing in the field you're already in. And this is a way to do it on the side, which I highly recommend. I know there's like a whole take no prisoners, Silicon Valley mentality. You just live on Soylent and quit everything. But most people aren't in a position to do that once they're beyond the point where they can live on their parents' couch, right? So if you're that age and you want to do that, fine. But there's a moment in time when you can do that. And then when you have kids and things like that, or you own a property, or you're going to have to think about, first of all, putting down the financial footing so that you can do this. That might be you rely on a spouse's income and cut down on your spending, or you live in a smaller house than you can afford, or you go out to eat once a month instead of once a week. Whatever it is, you need a little bit of a financial base so that you can do this, because you're going to need to invest a little bit, probably for most businesses, somewhere between $500 and $1,000 to start US dollars. Is realistic. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's less. If you're doing a consultancy, basically you need a computer and a phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say the areas to look at that I found most accessible in the book are e-commerce is probably number one. All those people who like if you go on Amazon and place an order and it says fulfilled by Amazon, that's probably somebody in their home who sells that one thing, whatever it is, pens or whatever. It's not Amazon usually. It's some individual who's owned that space and they become a vendor, and they are able to use Amazon's warehouses. They pay Amazon a small cut in every sale. So you don't need a lot of startup capital, but what you do need to do is understand how Amazon works and learn all the rules, which is not super simple. There's a learning process. There's a lot of gurus out there on Amazon selling, and you want to look around and find one that you find is a good teacher. Laszlo Nadler in my book started Tools for Wisdom Planners. In fact, he's my next call today.
Is he?
Yes, he is.
Wow.
He started his business on the side while working for Bank of America. He was a project manager. He loved organizing and planning, as you would imagine with a project manager.
Of course.
And he designed his own planners, day books, as to what he needed to get done that week. But it was focused on not what is my to-do list, but what do I need to do this week to move me towards my life's biggest goals, which is completely reframing things, right? So he put it up on Amazon on a very small scale. And then when it started taking off, I think the first year he told us he brought in about $12,000 in additional revenue. As he got to six-figure revenue over several years, he has a wife and two children. His wife is an at-home mom, so he was the income for the family. Then he felt he could quit his job, and now he's at $2 million in revenue. He just recently hired his first employee, but it's a journey. It's not like you just quit and you have sales, and that, if you try to, I mean, some people do that and it works, but that puts a lot of pressure on you, and it also gives you a very short runway. So there's that. There's professional services, personal services. So it could be, if you work in a field like nutrition or something like that, you could have your own, maybe you're a hospital nutritionist, you go out on your own in your own practice. Manufacturing is a new one where I see a lot of one-person businesses in the food industry who will hire a co-packer. It's a factory that basically puts it in jars or boxes in a way that's sanitary, so that if you wanted to sell it in Walmart or somewhere like that, you could do that. That's what a young couple in the book, they do Birch Bender's pancake mix.
Wow, okay.
And they used a co-packer, and now they've scaled the traditional way, but in the beginning it was just them. It's very hard to find a co-packer who will do a very small run, which is when you're an individual, to come up with $50,000 to do a small factory run, because they've got to fire up the machines. There's fuel involved. There's a lot involved. It's hard. But they wind up calling around a lot until they find one. There was another couple that did honey. They sold honey, and they used a co-packer. They're from California. That's a very big area right now with all the foodies, and because you can't make the food in your kitchen and sell it legally. You could make people sick if you don't have it like a laboratory. So there's that, and then there's real estate is another really great one that you could do on the side. So if you have a little extra money, Corey Binsfield, he's a fellow from Duluth, Minnesota. He wound up buying a duplex, and he rented one apartment out, and then he would use the funds from that investment to fuel the next one. He was a financial planner, but he was young at the time he started doing this, and wasn't making that much money as a financial planner. Mm-hmm. Now he has, last I spoke with him, he had 116 properties, and that's his $1 million one-person business. And he's a fun guy. He loves skateboarding, so he skateboards around his community. He calls it skateboarding for dollars. Properties that he could buy. And I thought that's just so inspiring. Now, he's a guy who's, I think he's in his 50s. So he's doing this. It's been a very sustainable career for him over the years since he started. I think he was about 30 when he started. So he's quite inspiring too. These are the most accessible areas. There are other ones that I will mention, but they're the highest revenue. It would be like a hedge fund. So if anyone's listening who does hedge funds, you could start your own hedge fund. There are people that are actors and actresses. Or book authors, people like that really make it big. But that I'm not recommending those things to the general public unless they have those specialized skills, because you'd have to learn how to do them from the ground up. Whereas a lot of these other areas that I'm looking at are the ones that, if you're in progress somewhat with these things, it's a continuum from what people are already doing.
Yeah, and I just think, like I said, I think everybody should just go and buy this book, $1 Million One-Person Business, because I think it's important to, there's lots of fluff on the internet about scams and making money online and making money at home and all that sort of thing. So it's important to get that inspiration from the real examples that Elaine has spoken about. There's one example that I really love is Carrie and Dave McKeegan of Greenback Tax. They've got their $4 million business where they've been doing tax planning, just based on tax planning. So get the book and get your inspiration from it, and take the leap of faith, and it is possible to do it. And Elaine is living proof of it, and all the people in her book are living proof of it as well. Elaine, I just wanted to say thank you to you. It's been wonderful, and I can't wait for the book to come now. I can't wait to read the book. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity. It's awesome to connect with your community, and what you're doing is so important. I see the proof of it when I go out and I meet people who have heard little things I've said on a podcast or whatever. You're really bringing your message to the world about the power of remote work. And Carrie and Dave McKeegan, just as a final closing note, they were living overseas as expats, and they noticed it was hard to find someone to do their taxes. So he actually went back to school to learn how to do it. And then they found freelance tax planners around the world to be their army of helpers, basically. And now they're living in Bali with their children. I love their story. Yeah, it's so amazing. And it shows what you can do if you want to. And they were driven, just like you and I, by our children. And it doesn't have to be children. It could be that you don't want your dog to be alone all day in the house. It could be that your elderly parent is alone. I mean, people are the most important thing. And these types of businesses allow you to put people first. And there's one message I would like people to take away. It's that. You don't have to live a sad life where a company is controlling your day and that you're not able to be responsive to the people that you love and that you care about, or to your community. It's very possible, but you have to take small steps. But once you take them, they build and they have a way of spiraling. And I hope that I'll hear from some of the listeners who created their own $1 million one-person businesses, so I can feature them too.
Well, I hope so. And just on a final note, what's in store for you, Elaine? What plans do you have? Any more books coming out at all?
I'm working. I was actually just working on my proposal for the next book, so I am planning another one that will explore some of the ideas a little deeper, and just keep on doing what I'm doing. I've been doing more speaking, which has been fun. I realize as an author, sometimes it is a little isolating, and getting out and meeting the real people out there who are acting on the ideas from the book has been fun. And by the way, I welcome anyone who's listening to write to me on LinkedIn or Twitter under my name, or I'm on Facebook also, all under Elaine Pofeld. So I do love to hear from people, and I hope that you'll tell me your stories. You don't have to be at 1 million. 1 million is a stretch goal. But if you add 100,000 in revenue to your business, that's still going to help you. And if you're just starting out and you have a great idea, I'd like to hear from you too, because as a journalist, it's really important for me to understand what the audience for these articles and books is going through. So please do get in touch.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, Elaine, thanks again for being with us. And actually say hello to Laszlo from us and thank him for his inspiration.
All right, Alex. Well, have a great day. I really enjoyed this, and keep in touch.
I will do, and I'll let you know how it all goes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.